Spoiler warning, this video contains fruit. The true name of said fruit to be precise, as well as why Shanks knew that name and more importantly, why he decided to tell 5 old men in a very fancy room. Because giving information to your enemies is generally quite counterproductive. But knowing what we do now, it was a stroke of scarlet-headed genius. Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. My name is Liam and my true name is also Liam. Sadly, there are no hidden god powers happening here. But in all of this fantastical fruit frenzy, we've neglected to examine Shanks' role. The man who very specifically stole a seemingly unimportant wrinkly sphere and put all of his hopes and dreams upon the head of a child who accidentally consumed said sphere. As per usual in One Piece, Shanks knows more than we know. However, we know that he knows more, which is a sentence I'm not entirely sure makes sense. But our Crimson 1000 piece jigsaw puzzle is finally coming together and making so much sense that we could use it to buy a small island off the coast of Nicaragua and name it Shanksland, where all residents are forced to dye their hair red and wear puffy 3/4 pants. And the first 3 residents of Shanksland include Crimson Monarch, Ruby Begum, and Rudd, which sounds like red but not quite, but each of whom did the amazing thing of pressing the subscribe button for the Grand Line Review, which will result in consistent injections of One Piece culture being administered directly into your YouTube feed. And if you want to be our next subscriber of the day, then hit the button and please do say hi in the comments below if you are a new member of the Grand Fleet. Welcome. Throughout this video, we will also be constructing the legal framework of Shanksland according to your suggestions, which were chosen at random. The best way to do politics. Choose the policies at random from randoms. Nothing can go wrong. In any case, our first degree of Shanksland is no left-handed doors. And yeah, fair enough. I suppose the wonderful residents of Shanksland need to learn to live like their one-armed monarch. So there is our first decree, and we have more stupid laws to come. Also, this video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends, the game that exists and is now celebrating its 3rd anniversary of said existence. It's officially older than things less than 3, and there has never been a better time to start playing. With hundreds of unique characters, Raid has never slowed down, with consistent additions such as the Shadowkin faction, the Doom Tower, and even the Hydra Clan boss. And to kick off the birthday celebrations, Raid has gifts for everyone. We're talking new champions, new artifact sets, and a fully personalized video showing every player's Raid journey and their own personal achievements. And there has never been a more better time to get started. And if you use my link or scan the QR code right here, new players will get a free starter pack worth almost $40 to kickstart your game. We're talking free champions: Misericord, Tiger Soul, and Romero, 10 Magic XP Brew, 10 Force XP Brew, and even 10 Spirit XP Brew, which is a lot of stuff that I am told is good. And since it's Raid's birthday, the gifts, they keep on coming. All new and existing players can get a bunch of free birthday gifts worth over $25. Once you're in game, just enter the promo code 3YearsRaid to get your hands on everything. Simple. Back to you, me. Question time now. Why did Shanks go out of his way to target a world government ship containing a CP9 feline, all for the sake of taking a miscellaneous devil fruit? Answer: he didn't. I mean, he did, but that's because he knew the true name of the Gomu Gomu no Mi. As a member of the Roger Pirate, Shanks is one of many scallywags potentially privy to the truth of the world. And even though he didn't go all the way to Laugh Tale because his friend was feeling a little sick that day, Shanks is still very much on the inside of this impregnable information castle. In fact, he was the one directly trusted by Roger to carry on this inherited will, as symbolized through the act of wearing a special hat. And so 12 years after the Roger Pirates disbanded, 11 years after Roger himself was executed, and a very shocking 9 years after Gaimon got stuck in a box, Shanks saw an unparalleled opportunity to carry on all of the will's stuff by discovering the whereabouts of the Gomu Gomu no Mi. Now POV, you're Shanks. You've just woken up, probably largely hungover, and a very round man has informed you that the world government have obtained control of literal god powers. So being the good boy you are, you assemble your mighty emperatic forces in order to prevent dooming the world right then and there. And short side note here, it's interesting that the world government assigned a CP9 agent simply for the sake of guarding a single devil fruit. Like, they're powerful and fun and stuff, but even then most of the fruits are treated much more casually, which I take the time to point out because it contributes to the ongoing debate regarding how much the 5 old dude guys know about the Gomu Gomu no Mi. Because it's clearly not nothing, but it's also clearly not much of something, and I'll get to why in a bit. In the meantime, what we know is that even though Who's Who credited Shanks as the fruit thief, the more technically correct answer is Lucky Roo, whose Vivia card claims that he is indeed our fruit liberator, which is very interesting because we now have a Who versus Roo scenario. And as we all know, when 2 characters with rhyming names meet up in One Piece, it triggers an automatic a rap battle. Other potential examples include Luffy versus Stussy, Nico Robin versus Thrifty Bobbin, and Scratch Menapoo versus a literal pile of poo. And honestly, in that last scenario, I would put my money on the fecal matter. But Who's Who was unable to bring the rhyme, and therefore he was forced to do the time. And the fated fruit was found and won, rather appropriately, by a man literally named Lucky. And so Shanks, now having the necessary key required to save the world, decided to do what all good Australians do after a shift on the job, which is to head down to the pub. And it would be at said pub that disaster struck. But not before we discover Shanks' decree number, the second one, which I think rather appropriately is: all fruits in boxes must be sealed with an actual lock. A very important law, really, because Shanks experienced first, and I guess now only hand, the folly of not properly protecting your fruit. As due to a situation involving a bandit, a few more bandits, and a very, very wet Shanks, our protagoboy Monkey D. Luffy would find his way into the fruit stash and end up consuming by far the most important fruit that this world has ever known. And just imagine being Shanks in that situation. For at least a second, he must have thought that he had just doomed the entire world. Like, I imagine his thought process was something like, this random boy just ate one of the most powerful devil fruits in all of existence that is directly tied to being able to fulfill the will of the former pirate king, as well as Joy Boy, the will of D, and even the ancient sun god. And you, by which I mean me, have just effed everything harder than Big Mom gunning for her 85th child. Shanks had one job. That job was to not have the fruit be eaten arbitrarily by a hungry village boy. And he failed spectacularly. Or did he? Because this was actually all according to fruit-based keikaku. As we have recently learned from the 5 old men, Zoan-type devil fruits tend to have a will of their own, each containing a seemingly independent life form. And this Hito Hito no Mi model Nika was a particularly slippery and mischievous Zoan that had eluded 8 centuries worth of old men trying to capture it, which means that it's almost impossible to eat this fruit by accident. The only mouth hole consuming this fruit is the hole that the fruit chooses. So it's less about Luffy eating the fruit and more about the fruit itself infiltrating Luffy, something that Shanks, a man acquainted with the great fruit truth, would eventually come to realize, thus having it dawn on him that Luffy was some form of chosen one, which to be fair was also already flagged by him having a big old D in his name. But that's why Shanks was also instantly willing to give up one of his arms in order to save him. In Shanks's words, he bet his arm on the new era. However, in retrospect, this bet is the equivalent of walking into a casino and deciding to play a version of roulette where the only colors are red and the only number is 56. Chances are, no matter which of the red 56s you bet on, things are gonna work out pretty well. And speaking of working well, let's check in with the developing legal system of Shanksland with our third decree, which is: no piano teeth people are allowed. One must have adequate hygiene. This is of course a law that's designed to essentially say no Blackbeards. But of course saying that so blatantly, well, that would be discrimination. And Shanks would be taken to court with Blackbeard hiring the best lawyers that Cherry Pie can afford. Now speaking of Blackbeard, that is what Shanks probably wasn't doing that one time. By which I am of course referring to the famed meeting on Marijois in chapter 907. Shanks rocked up in quite a fashionable cloak to speak to the 5 old men about a certain pirate, one who until recently was thought almost certainly to have been Blackbeard. And I suppose it still could be, but now Luffy is looking much more likely. The key here is determining how much the 5 elders knew about the Gomu Gomu no Mi prior to Wano. And traditionally, One Piece says that it's not much. In fact, the elders have even spoken directly about Luffy in chapter 594, stating, "This Straw Hat Luffy is always in the news, but considering he's Garp's grandson, I'm not surprised." Right, so Luffy is always in the news, or at least enough to catch the attention of the various geriatrics, but at no point did they consider him a threat worthy of immediate assassination until Wano. And that says to me that they likely had no idea about the truth of his fruit. And the only thing that changed between Wano and not Wano was speaking to Shanks, after which point the collective incontinence of the elders would have been enough to make Aqua Laguna look like a pleasant wave on a beach. And so they became so desperate for the bathroom, but after that desperate to rid the world of Luffy, that they sacrificed one of their top CP0 agents and directly provoked the mighty Fish Lord Kaido. Now with that said, before we examine why Shanks would ever tell them such a thing, there is another potential solution, which is that the elders were given this information by Eam, who promptly instructed them to erase the now literal light that is Luffy from the world. That is a definite chance, although it does bring up questions about, why would Eam keep this a secret for so long? What gives, Mr. Shadow Guy? I mean, if Luffy's name had been well known for such an awfully long time now, maybe you should have told us and just stuff like that. I mean, talking about Eam is always tricky because there's so much mystery, like we don't even know if Eam is human. Quite similarly to Shanks, I suppose, because this often legless set of hairy legs generally functions as a walking question mark, with one of those many questions being, if he did know about Luffy, then why did he tell the bad guys about the thing that he knew that they didn't? Well, the answer is reasons. But then the question becomes, what are those reasons? And I don't know the answer to that question. And right now, the only thing that really fits is the idea that Shanks and the Roger Pirates became aware of the future of this world, something that has been very much flagged through Oden and Toki with their specific predictions concerning Joy Boys and such. But maybe the knowledge was even more detailed than that. Perhaps Shanks was somehow aware that the actions of the world government were needed to trigger Luffy's awakening, and therefore he barged into Marijwa, poked the old men with the stick of intrigue, and then headed down to the pub for a pint, whilst the dawn of the new world played out around him. And getting very conspiratorial right now, perhaps that's also why he prevented Kaido from attacking Whitebeard, because he knew that Kaido was an important piece of this puzzle as well. But that's probably going a bit too deep down the speculation hole. Instead, let's ask the next ridiculous question. Who else knew the truth of Luffy's powers? Because it certainly wasn't just Shanks. And we'll find out who that is after our next decree from Shanksland, which is... no bathrooms, only bushes. Fair enough, I suppose bathrooms are a bit of a hassle with all the flushing and the washing and the general cleanliness. Party Shanks has no time for such frivolities, something which he has no doubt learned from fellow bush pisser Silver's Rayleigh, because Rayleigh has to have known about Luffy. In fact, going back on the series, it's quite impactful to examine the first time that Rayleigh met Luffy and mentioned Shanks, because in Rayleigh's words regarding the Straw Hat, when I asked him about it, he talked about you with the biggest smile on his face. Smiling being one of those fairly innocuous words and actions that have become ridiculously important in recent times. But thinking back on it, Rayleigh very much could have structured everything. I've said this before, but Rayleigh was the one who chose the 2-year training period, almost certainly knowing that whatever needed to happen would only happen after that 2 years. And I can just imagine Rayleigh watching Luffy use Gear 4th for the first time and seeing some of that latent Sun God power emerging. But it does make you wonder who else was in on this. Another potential candidate includes Whitebeard, because Roger, well, he spilled quite a lot of world government branded tea directly into his lap, and so when Whitebeard encountered Luffy for the first time, it all of a sudden makes much more sense that he was so willing to order his entire crew to protect Luffy, despite the fact that they were in the middle of a slightly important war against the greatest military might on the planet. But for someone who likely did discover the truth involving this fruit, well, that would be Kozuki Oden, who may not be able to say that truth with his mouth full due to the whole death thing, but who may very well have written it down in a certain journal which certain people have now read. Although Yamato and Momonosuke's surprise at Luffy's awakened form probably debunks that idea pretty quickly. But Shanks certainly wasn't the only one to know, and behind the scenes, this cohort of knowledge knowers have been strategically manipulating events in the favor of our rubber boy. Now let us manipulate the fifth and most important decree of Shanksland, which is... be excellent to each other and party on, dudes. And one way of being excellent is by watching this next video, so I look forward to seeing you there. I just realized I printed this off and I probably didn't need to because I'm not sticking it on the wall.